Hello and welcome back to Pass the Torch, Legacies in Jewelry. My name is Naja de Savandiste and I am your host. Today we have Jamie McLandsborough here joining us, and he is one of the very first people that ever encouraged me in this particular field. And so I felt like it was so important to have him on, one, because he's local, and part of my mission in this podcast is also to really highlight a lot of the local artists that I have here in Colorado, but also because he is just incredibly experienced, incredibly eloquent, and just a wonderful, wonderful person. And so I had the joy of sitting down and connecting with him. He is a jeweler of 30 years, and he had a really long-standing tenure at Gusterman's Fine Jewelry, which was downtown in Denver, Colorado. He's also a phenomenal educator and just a lover of the craft and an innovator. He has done so much for just the love of jewelry and the love of jewelry continuing and tools and machinery. And so I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I loved getting to, know him better. And Jamie, thank you so much for jumping on. This was a wonderful conversation. Here it is right now. All right, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Jamie is one of the very first people that I met when initially starting to discover what tools I wanted. So he was at Boulder Metalsmithing Association selling some of his tools as he was prepping to retire, and I bought up a few of his equipment pieces. But the reason why I felt like, Jamie, I had to have you on this podcast. You're one of the first guests, but the reason why I felt like I had to have you on at some time was because there was a moment where you actually changed, I think, the trajectory of my life, and I don't even think you're aware of that. Specifically in reference to, I had just taken a class where it was my first bezel class, and I was really frustrated with myself on pushing the metal, and I felt like I didn't have the strength for it. And you said the most encouraging thing to me about your perspective on female jewelers. And I don't even know if you remember. If you do remember it, do you mind reiterating what you said?
I've always felt like men get the opportunity to cheat on technique. Not all men, of course. Some, just for size and weight, tend to be able to force their way past a piece of metal, whereas people, usually women, need to finesse. And it's learning to finesse, and it's learning how to work with the metal rather than overpowering it, that, in my opinion, makes a superior jeweler in the end. Yeah.
And you've seen lots of jewelry in your, absolutely, in your 20 or 30 year career?
Yeah, 30.
Yeah. So do you mind telling me a little bit about how you got started?
So I grew up in a really small town in Colorado. The landmark that people generally know if they're from Colorado is a small town called Fairplay. It's dead in the center of the state in the mountains. And I grew up on a cattle ranch. And, one of the things about growing up that way is you learn to use your hands really quickly. It is common to have vice grips, pliers, pocket knives, things like that. And so I felt like I don't think I ever learned how to use my hands. It was something that natural. It just always was there. It's always been there. And as I got into high school, I was not the best student. I thought I just didn't do very well with sitting still. So I would skip school and I'd go get jobs because I figured if I was working and making money, no one would yell at me, which wasn't true. They still yelled. But I would work for art framers. There was an art framer in town, a production art framer. I would work for jewelers. I worked for a potter. I worked for two brothers who did crafts, handicrafts, and recreated small. It was an offshoot of the framing business. They created really small arrows, very small spears that we would frame into the frames. And their names were Two Dogs, Doyle, and Jim Redhawk. So I was always around people who did that. And I guess in the end, I just felt like jewelry had the most to offer. I would pick up a book and learn something or read something and there would be reference to something else, and that would be another book. Or another person in some cases. I'd go find people to teach me things. And that's how I spent a large majority of 16 to about 25, is I would find different techniques or find different people to teach me techniques. And I'd go all over the board. I tried sculpture, I tried blacksmithing, everything. But in the end, jewelry turned out to be a way that I could make money, the easier way. Blacksmithing and sculpture require a lot of metal, a lot of time, and a lot of space.
Yes.
Yeah. So
My husband is a blacksmith.
right? Yeah. So you understand that big pile that he has out in the backyard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just my shop is in working condition right now, so it's, don't look too closely. But it's quite messy also in comparison. Jewelry making isn't, I wouldn't consider it clean, but it can be in comparison to metalsmithing.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
that too.
Well, it's all kind of the same. There's the same theories involved, but yeah. Yes, it's really interesting stuff. So suppose that, in all of the things as I was working through my various interests in exploring, jewelry became the thing that I could take with me. I could put it in a toolbox or still fit it into my the little cars and so on that I drive around. And I had this small bench that I started with when I was young, and it stayed with me for 20 years. It was something that I did just move along, and it moved from a kitchen to a closet to a buddy's closet to, as I was moving along. So,
Well, and that's what I found when I was purchasing tools from you was the tools that you were selling me were the exact same that I could go buy new, because jewelry tools really haven't changed that much. Obviously, there's some equipment that's brand new, but jewelry has been relatively the same for about 200 years.
Yeah. I think, you start talking about the big changes like compressed air. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I have a compressor, or like a kind of compressor back there. But anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the big notable things that I think we should talk about your career was your tenure at Gusterman's Silversmithing jewelry store in downtown Larimer Square, which for those who aren't Colorado based, Larimer Square is kind of this epicenter of food and art, and I think of this wine bar down there when I think of Larimer Square, and movie theaters. It's just kind of a hub for all the action, and it's known for having these strung lights overhead and beautiful Colorado flags hanging down. So it's a beautiful place to go to work. I'm sure parking was atrocious. I hope you had a designated parking spot when you were there to have worked there for so long. But talk to me about some of the most memorable projects that you were a part of.
There's a lot. With Gusterman's, the really great thing about Gusterman's is that it was a small shop and with a big following. The woman who owned it, her name was Mary Eccles, and Mary bought this store in the set and was able to build a really strong following with both custom silver work, custom gold work. She won awards for her platinum work and also did a really healthy amount of repair. So we saw things that you don't see in normal jewelry stores. We worked on saddles. When the Westerniers would come through with their silver saddles, I would do repair for them. And that usually happens right around Christmas. Then she did the Telluride Film Festival, which has become very, very popular over the years. She made their awards from the first award that they ever gave away. She made the medals for every Telluride Film Festival up to this year. We worked for the Weavers Guilds. We worked for a variety of guilds, people who had awards or had mentions. I worked for synagogues. I worked for churches, building their various things that they needed to celebrate within their particular religion. So we're fixing or repairing, sometimes building new. I built assistance devices. People who had lost control of the use of part of their fingers or their arm. I would build silver pointers, and we would sometimes, after iPads and iPhones, I would add capacitive rubber to them so they could use their devices. And sometimes these things were impressive because of their cost. We had, there was times in my career where I would take out an insurance policy for 3 days just to cover the thing that I needed to work on at that particular moment.
Right.
I called those experiences life-changing work. If I messed it up, nothing would ever be the same.
Right.
And then there were things where I was rebuilding pot metal childhood memories.
Mm.
Pot metal is a very low temperature metal, usually melts at about 400 degrees, and cheap.
Easy to melt.
Easy to melt. It doesn't hold up, but it doesn't matter because so much of jewelry is about the emotion that's attached to it. It's impressive to see the big stuff. It's impressive to see $1 million diamond. Blows your mind. But in my experience, the people who own those things did not value them as much as the young woman coming in with the pendant that her mother gave to her before she passed away. So
I've
it's,
had that same job come across my bench.
yeah, and we just have to treat both with equal respect. And the thing that I really loved about Gusterman's is Mary would always tell me, I'm not taking in any more of that sort of work because we'd always lose money. We'd spend it all the time and sell it for $20, But no matter how many times she would tell herself that, the next couple job envelopes I'd open up, I'd see something that was so emotionally important. And I knew that she couldn't say no. And that was the one thing that was really beautiful about her. By the way, she passed away in January of this year, really suddenly. So yeah, a
Well,
very
hopefully by
kind and
talking
beautiful
about her,
soul.
we can honor and remember her legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. So, yeah. But I think that you asked me specifically one of the things I enjoyed the most. There's a long list,
But I understand to summarize your point. I mean, it's kind of the reason why I got into jewelry to begin with was my grandmother had given me a ring. It was always intended to be kind of my inheritance, but she gave it to me while she was still alive so she could see me wear it. But this ring that her husband bought her in Egypt, and it's like 18 karat yellow gold and a beautiful sapphire and stuff like that. But that was such an emotional hit for me that I was receiving like such a gift like that. And it wasn't even about whether or not it was valuable. It was like she carried this through part of her life. Now I get to carry it through the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Jewelry, I think, holds memories. It's heirlooms, and we have the responsibility of caring for that when it needs repair or a redesign or just creating it from the genesis to begin with. All of that is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that was one of the other things that was really wonderful about working in that particular shop is we were into the third and fourth generation in families, making items for them as keepsakes, starting usually with a wedding ring back in the 70s to a second wedding ring, moving into various baby gifts. So it was really powerful to see an entire group of people tied in that way to that shop.
What a
Yeah.
legacy. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Oh man, you have also had teaching as a pretty significant part of your career. Like you've had where I met you, classes at Boulder Metalsmithing Association, and I also have here Clear Creek Academy.
Yeah.
What motivated you to start teaching, and what do you hope students take away from learning from you? I know I took something away from you even in the 5-minute initial interaction that we had. You're
Yeah.
very encouraging.
Well, the first thing I should say, just a general philosophy I have, is that it's a two-way street. Teaching is, I can give away some experiences or knowledge, maybe let some folks off the hook so they're not so hard on themselves. And I can also, but the thing is, I gain something out of it as well. And I gain different perspectives. People ask me questions that I need to go back and examine. There's some things that you don't, the way I grew up in learning with somebody or reading it in a book, sometimes I wouldn't go back and examine that, and sometimes I'd be wrong. And so that would give me the opportunity to learn that again, make it better. So teaching is a two-way street. I really got into it just mostly because, well, a friend of mine, her name's Kathy Pritchett. She had started a school that's Clear Creek Academy and was looking for stone setting. And at the time, that was my real strong passion. I was trying to work through and master every stone setting style I could find. And so I started teaching at her school, and it's just fun to be able to walk somebody through an experience and they get to hold it in their hand. I didn't do a very good job at first. I grew up while I was learning. It was very technique based, trial and error. One of my instructors or mentors once gave me about 100 3mm amethysts and a piece of metal and told me to flesh set all of them. I learned a lot in that. But so I started out that way. I thought, well, this is what I'm going to do with everybody else.
Just out of curiosity, what shape were the amethysts? Were they
In
round?
this case, it was round. But I was at Kathy's. I was teaching people how to flesh set marquee and pear shapes.
Yeah. For jewelry people who don't sit at the bench or who don't know, an amethyst is a very delicate stone. It's easy to crack, and when you're flesh setting, you're very often putting pressure down onto the stone, or at least onto the sides of it. So what he's describing here is a recipe for disaster, basically.
Frustration.
Or at least my nightmare. I learned on diamonds, and
right.
I'm like, we're now realizing that my point of privilege.
I don't know that it's privilege at all. It's just I needed to learn touch, and that was his point. So after 100 stones in very, very stiff metal, I had a touch that I didn't have before. But as I understood teaching a little bit more, I started to change to creating small projects that included 2 techniques, maybe 3 techniques, and you could walk people through the techniques in it and leave them feeling successful. And that I find is really where the value is, where the beauty is for that experience.
And the joy in sharing, I feel like so often, and I kind of talked a little bit about this with Jason Marchiafava, but kind of the approach that, so many generations have learned their techniques and then not passed them down.
Yeah.
And intentionally not taught or shared them. And I think that's such a shame because we lose so much in that.
It's understandable in a way. I definitely grew up in that generation. I have experiences in my past where I would walk into a jewelry store, obviously looking for a job, and the bench jeweler would walk out and threaten me and insult me and tell me to get, and so on. There was an idea, I think, that the pie was only so big, and that that everybody had their piece, and if I took any of it, I was taking from somebody. And I really enjoy that as in my lifetime, that shifted in a really wonderful way. And you have people who are top of their field, very happy to show the technique that brought them up to the top of their field and pass it freely on to others. It was a very, very significant shift. And I guess that is part of why I felt it was also necessary to teach, is the generation that I learned from came out of World War II and the craft renaissance. Um, they knew things that and had me do things that I just won't well, some of it I can't teach because it's too damn dangerous, and but they just had an approach that went away, and with that generation, which was really, really sad.
Yeah, they just had, a by all means get it done
Yeah,
ethos.
yeah,
And at all means sometimes meant at all means.
yeah, yeah.
You speak so fondly of this uh time in your life at Gusterman's. How did the close, because that shop did close.
Yeah.
How did that impact you?
It has a significant emotional impact. I spent a lot of time with a lot of people, and I'm retired now. But to be really honest, I still do work for some of those folks who call me because I just can't say no to them. And yeah. So, but yeah, it had a very strong emotional impact from a more of a personal or financial or business. I kind of knew it was coming. You know, uh, the way that Mary was the way that she felt about the world at that moment. She did her taxes by paper, and that was becoming harder and harder because
Yeah.
everybody's moving online. She liked to pay. Uh, I actually had somebody call me and said, "I just got a check from Mary. What do I do with it?" So yeah, I
Like,
know.
right?
So yeah, I just was. It was time. It was time to let that move forward. And at that moment, I wasn't in a position where I could continue the legacy. She also didn't necessarily want to completely give it up. After she closed the store, she continued with Gusterman's until she died in January. After she passed, all of us pulled together to finish her last orders because she still had orders to do. So, yeah.
That speaks so much to her character.
Yeah.
As we are kind of talking about the advancements, there are so much advancements in also just the way that consumers consume
Yeah.
jewelry and kind of preferences in design. How do you envision the future of custom jewelry and metalsmithing?
So there's a really, really great book and I'm going to butcher his name, but you correct. And I think I don't remember the first, but it's you correct. And he wrote Jewelry Technology, I believe is the name of it. It's one of the bigger, thick jewelry books.
I probably have it
You
back there.
probably do.
One of those. It's probably one of those 7.
Yeah. In the front of that, he has something that he calls a mandala. And the mandala is describing different ways that jewelry is expressed. Sometimes it's expressed through status, sometimes it's keepsakes. There's, also investment and everything else. And when I first saw that, I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't think I wondered if it actually really applied or if it was just an academic argument. And what I think now is the jewelry consumers that I've met over the last 10 years are really knowledgeable. They have the ability to research and understand things. They also very lately, are comfortable asking for things that are interesting to them. I'm at times making things surrounding different fandoms, making jewelry, engagement rings even, that were a shared passion around a movie or a game. I and Also people are starting to look back into the history of things in a way that just wasn't really available. 25 years ago, 20 years ago. You would look through, you would see things that were in the case. You'd see things that were on TV. You'd see things that were in a catalog. And until you went to a particular store that maybe had antique or looking into seeing, like the first time I saw Etruscan work, it blew my mind.
Yes.
And so, uh, but people now talk to me about that sort of stuff because they've seen it somewhere. And so I think there's a sophistication. I think that there's also, hopefully, it will continue to be a willingness to take a chance and build something that is unique and special to them. I highly encourage these folks, and it's not something you necessarily find in a standard retail store, but there are people in the world who make unique and very special things just for you. And that, if you are interested in that, they can also make it affordable. So, that's once you realize that's possible, the world is your oyster as a consumer of something beautiful, and you can go out and make anything you want. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities for it. There's always been a uniformity. I can tell you within 10 years when a woman was married, when a man or a woman was married, based on the type of jewelry that they're wearing.
Oh, wow.
Because there's significant trends that carry
Yeah.
through.
Yes.
And that's how that works. That's human nature. So, I don't ever, and I'm not casting shade. I'm just saying that that's part of us. We're all that way. So, yeah.
Yes, I am guilty of having a oval diamond engagement ring with a gold band. Mine's a little bit chunkier, so it's not like I feel like everyone who got married in the last 4 or 5 years has a super thin gold band with an oval diamond.
Yes.
Like I mentioned earlier, the gold ring that I inherited from my grandmother, it was oval. So my husband got me an oval diamond as an homage to that.
Nice.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
shoot, but it's also a trend. And I
Yeah.
also everyone's going to know when I got married, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I also have more than one engagement ring.
A little tip to people who are in an engagement ring field, or they're making engagement rings. Find the diamond that is not popular. Start making those.
Yes.
Because somebody will buy them, and that's how you cover your margin.
Well, and I'm finding that the conscious consumer really wants something one of a kind. And
Yes.
it's so hard to achieve that through a big box. You really have to go, that's why, we really want to keep these really special artisan shops like Gusterman's alive because it allows for that opportunity. You can't go to a big box like that and have someone hand fabricate a ring for you. It just doesn't happen. So I think protecting, or just talking about those artists, putting them out there, encouraging them to continue, giving them education, giving them grants, all of that. What do you think is the most misunderstood part of being a bench jeweler?
Most of my career, when I tell people I was a jeweler, especially when I was younger, people would be like, "Oh yeah, that's great," and they'd show me their friend's beadwork. And I would, and I'd ooh and ah over it because that's what you do, and support it. But I don't think people necessarily understand the amount of technology that I worked with. I don't think they necessarily understood the precision that was involved and the speed that it went at. So I was an early adopter of CAD, took CAD, still use CAD. So if there was a jewelry technology that was growing, I was involved in it because for me, it was about how to cut down time and allow more money in the door. So without compromising too much, there was always that line to try to find. So yeah, sometimes I'd be able to talk about that. Sometimes I'd be able to talk about what it meant to, 3D axis lathes were a thing
Yes.
around cutting wax for three-dimensional when in the early days of CAD. And those things were such a pain in the butt. They, you know, so yeah, I would find that if there was a machinist in the room, we had a long conversation, but
Right.
it just, people didn't necessarily know what I meant, right? Not many people had someone in their family who did what I did, or even had met someone who worked with their hands and did what I did. So I guess what I'm saying is the whole thing at a certain point was kind of misunderstood. Um, but
It's
that
also
was
so
also kind of fun.
expensive to get into. Like that machinery is expensive. To
Gosh,
continue
yeah.
your education and to continue to be a jeweler, just having the job, there is constant upgrades that need to be happening.
Yeah, yeah. And someday you and I will talk about how to do that.
I would,
Because I've got planned. That's a thing that I always did. So yeah, it's I do want to, in mentioning that, I do want to say that that might indicate to people that you have to get all the cool machines. You don't. You really don't. A lot of techniques can be done out of two small toolboxes and a kitchen table. And beautiful things can happen with a combination of three techniques. And so don't get the idea that you have to spend a lot of money. But there is a known problem in every jeweler, in every stonecutter and watchmaker. Almost all of the other related fields have this problem. It's a tool sickness. It's an addiction. Once you start buying tools, you just can't stop. So do know that part too. So, yeah.
I feel really lucky right now in my career. I kind of have two prominent mentors,
Yes.
and one is very savvy and with a lot of upscale tools, and the other is in my head just the ultimate MacGyver.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
they have the same ethos for jewelry that it is excellent from both of them, but I will learn a skill, the exact same skill from each of them, and it will have two entirely different approaches. And I think if I went and learned it from five other people, I would learn five other ways to do it,
Yeah.
specifically thinking about flush setting.
Yeah. 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 You can buy all the GRS equipment, and nowadays it's maybe $20,000. Or you can get a smallish hammer and a nail, and probably do close to the same thing. So but that's the beauty of it. That's the
Where there's a
fun.
will, there's a way.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah. Looking back on everything that's crossed your bench, I know we kind of talked about a few of the things that impacted you just from, kind of an emotional standpoint and how you felt honored to play small roles in people's lives and in their important heirlooms. But is there one particular piece or project that comes to mind that you are especially proud of, either technique-wise or emotionally or just...
Yeah, technique-wise, I worked for an antique jeweler, and as a result, I learned and worked with a lot of older work. And based on that background, a person came in, and he brought his wife's Edwardian engagement ring. Edwardian is known for light, lacy platinum work, small, unique diamonds. The diamonds at that point weren't always necessarily even round. We called them mine cuts. Sometimes they were called Euro cuts, but distinct. Sometimes you look at those and wonder which way was up. And then an old mine center stone, pretty good size. He had run over it with a car and
Yeah, I've had
brought
the
it in.
drop in the disposal before, but
Yes.
the run over with the car, I've seen it actually once, but it wasn't my project.
Yeah. Platinum is incredibly durable, but it's also extremely malleable. It moves nicely, which is one of the great reasons why it's such a great jewelry metal, but not always one of the reasons why it's going to hold up to a car. So this old Edwardian piece, which was tremendously valuable emotionally to this family, he'd run over. So he brought it in and gave it to me, and I looked at it and like, oh no. But over the course of about a month, whenever I had a pause, I'd pull it out and I'd work on it a little bit. And I'd anneal it and pull it back out, and I'd pull it back out, and I'd find stones to replace it, the old mine cuts. And at that point, I had a laser welder, so I could build or replace some things relatively easily compared to the old torch techniques. That was a definite advantage. And eventually I got it done and picked it up, paid me, and then told me later on, he came back in, and he's like, so, after that experience, I realized how close I was to losing something. So I figured I better get insurance. So I took it to an appraiser, a well-known guy here in Denver, and he didn't know that anything had happened to it. He said that it had worked. And I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would
Right?
too.
I felt pretty good about that. I got somebody who's not known in the past. That same appraiser has not always been nice to me. It was good.
That's like getting a good critique from that feels like the moment at the end of the Ratatouille movie when the food critic just recognizes good work.
Yeah.
And also something to know about platinum is it also works incredibly hot. So just and you have to clean your station and keep everything. It's just such for people who work in platinum all the time, it becomes like second nature. But for those who are just starting out in platinum or occasionally working in platinum, it feels like a beast to work.
It's scary, right? To get something, because don't get me wrong, gold is not at low temperatures, but it's a different animal. Yeah. Which is the beauty of it too, because you take the torch off and it doesn't look like a torch touched it.
This is just a reminder to everyone to go get their jewelry appraised, because in certain situations, like the car running over it, in certain claims, they will also cover extensive repairs like that.
Yes.
So it sounds like he paid you out of pocket, but he could have been able to file a jewelry claim for that as well.
Yeah. Good
If you
PSA.
had, I know you're retired now, and congratulations on your
Thank you.
retirement. That's wonderful. However, if you had unlimited budget and unlimited resources, what would you create as a kind of final?
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in how, it's kind of, I think I like new technologies. I wonder what it would be like to be able to hand build some of the technology with capacitive rubbers, and so that you could control things. I really enjoy that sort of stuff. But I guess if I truly had unlimited budget, if I was able to do whatever I wanted, I would go back, probably be close to my childhood, and I would find the biggest place I could, and I would fill it with every technique that I could find. I'd start welding again. I would start sculpture again. I love machinists. The being able to cut things to that precision, and I would just tinker. It would be really a happy thing for me to be able to continue exploring that way. And maybe I will someday. Maybe I'll be able to find something. I also would like to not have to, it's also a really great freedom to be able to make something, buy something and make something, and not worry about having to sell it. If you work in the jewelry industry the way I did for as long as I did, one of the curses is you can never look at a beautiful piece of jewelry without wondering how long it took, what it cost, and what they sold it for. And because it's just ingrained, that's what I think about when I look at stuff. And I would love to get back to that naive self that I had in my, when I didn't know any better, and would just try things because I could.
When the love of jewelry wasn't lensed with the
Right. Yes.
perspective of.
Thank you. That's a very nice way of saying that. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I understood. I understood.
Yeah. 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 I don't think it had anything to do with age. It's just more of a perspective. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you and I know each other, but just at large, and then you can get more specific to me if I can be so bold as to request. But what piece of advice would you give to someone just starting out in the trade, specifically as a bench jeweler?
I think that imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it's a hard thing to get around. I think it's worse now because we conceive so much more and compare ourselves to so many different types of people and types of work. And so having a healthy way to deal with that is a really good idea. I don't know how everybody, but finding a technique to be able to put that part of, or that particular little green monster down for a minute is something that I would highly suggest for just about everybody.
Hmm.
In my experience, I have met a wide variety of people as both customers and makers, some of them wildly popular people, famous in whatever particular thing they were doing. And I've always found that passion and interest will start just about every conversation. So set aside that fear or that imposter syndrome and go up to that person and talk about the thing that you're looking at that really turns you on. And you're going to be surprised that they're going to respond to that and they're going to say, yes. And this is what I'm into now. And it crosses all professions. It crosses, but it's very particular in jewelry. If you get a bunch of us together, you will very often, after about 30 minutes, you'll see people huddling with their heads almost together, talking about this thing very, very loudly and passionately. And that is beautiful. And you can be part of that. So it doesn't matter if you started yesterday, and it doesn't matter if you've got years under your belt. The passion is the same, and that's the common link. So get out there. Second thing, pick up old books. I would like to argue that the internet has done a pretty good job. My kids don't believe this, by the way. This is an argument we have. I don't think we've managed to upload everything onto the internet yet. And especially old knowledge that nobody really is looking for. For example, the recipe to repair an ivory cane that's been cracked. There's a recipe in an old book out there, and you could find that. Some of this stuff has been uploaded. There's a fellow, Charles Luton Brain. He does brain press, and he collects and uploads old books and sells them digitally for a couple bucks. Do remember that some of the old stuff, when you read that, safety third was how they did things. Right? So don't just fire into it. Think about it for a minute. Maybe ask somebody.
I've got a little library back there, and most of the books are from the 80s. And I'm like
Yeah.
looking through, and it's these old equipment, old photos drawn in, and I'm like, that doesn't look so safe.
Yeah. Now, yeah, it was, well, and, things that you just don't. I would hurt myself just because I didn't understand the reactions that were going to happen. So, yeah, but go find the knowledge, go find the people. And then finally, everybody learns differently, but I found a lot of luck in my life focusing in on one technique and doing it every possible way. And then I would tool up and pick the next technique.
I
And
like that.
you can, you can make a lot of jewelry with just a saw and a ball peen hammer. So don't feel like you need to get into it too far. Just find the technique, learn everything you can about it. And when you feel like you could do it in your sleep, pick another technique. And eventually you'll be able to tie all of that together. And the way that you choose to do those techniques will become your hand. And by hand, I mean, that's how some people, you look at their work and you just know it's them. That's a hand. So yeah, that'd be so you got a lot. I'm on a roll. 3 bits of advice.
That's a lot of good. I feel like my cheeks are sore because I've just been smiling this whole time because you're just so wonderful. Thank you for sharing and just being willing to connect with me. And I have one more question for you that I didn't include in here, but I'm going to put you on the spot anyways in advance, which is, who would you like to nominate as the next person that I interview? Who do you think I should bring onto this platform?
Okay, I'll give you a couple.
I'll take a couple.
Yeah. 2 of them are older folks who will have a perspective on what happened with craft, what happened with the Society of one of them was instrumental in creating the Society of North American Goldsmiths, created our local here, Coma, and is somebody who teaches extensively an older technique. His name is Harold O'Connor. He's in Salida. It might take you a second to find him. The gentleman, Charles Luton Brink, but talk to...
almost every week.
To Chapin about Harold. Okay? And because he'll be able to help you get connected. It won't be a video interview.
Well, maybe I'll drive out to Salida and bring the camera.
Right. Well, it might be. I shouldn't say that, but...
I know what you mean.
And then another challenge might be Luton Brain. Professor in Canada, has been teaching techniques and writing books, and probably has one of the best understandings of the nature of from a phase point of view that you'll ever talk to. You can get really nerdy with Mr. Brain.
I love it.
He's someone who has been instrumental in American jewelry for a very, very long time. And then there's, for locals, I suppose some of the up-and-coming, they're not up-and-coming, they're all powerhouses all into themselves. I shouldn't say that. They've, like remembering like 7 years ago, but these people are, so Into the Woods is a jewelry store. Check them out. And then Into the Woods, I might be messing that up. I'll get back to you on that. I need to think if I actually look that up. But you might talk to Autumn Lundberg. Autumn is a piercer who also does jewelry and does truly bespoke jewelry. And because of her ability as a piercer, is able to customize it in a way that is well outside of traditional jewelry norms. Yeah. And I'll get you Autumn's contact information. I'll also look up Charles and Harold and send those to you. So yeah, the couple really, like, if you walk through just about any jewelry market, outdoor jewelry market, and if it's the type of place that posts CVs, have you been to markets where they post CVs, like art markets? Those 2 men, Harold and Luton Brain, are on everybody's CV. Yeah.
A good broad network right there. That's amazing.
Yeah. And they're entertaining so and have a perspective that I think you might enjoy. They're the generation just before me.
Yeah. Jamie, you are kind and generous, and this has been so fun. We are at exactly 1 hour, which is my longest interview to date. You're so easy to talk to. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and for spending this time with me. And I hope to stay in touch with you. I hope to give you updates on my career as I develop as well.
I would love to hear it. I'd love to hear how you, in another 5 years, somebody's going to mention your name and I'll be, oh yeah, I met her when she was just starting. No, she's something else. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. Have a great rest of your evening.
See you later. Bye-bye.